Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farba. As the European Central Bank faces mounting pressure to rethink how it measures inflation, new research suggests a radical shift, moving away from headline inflation toward tracking price growth and discretionary spending. Now, could such a change make monetary policy fairer and more effective, especially for lower-income households across Europe? And what would it mean for countries like Poland, where spending patterns differ sharply from those in the Eurozone core? And now to discuss it further, we're joined by Witold Orłowski, economist, Witold University and Warsaw University of Technology. Good to have you on the program. Thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
So, Witold, let's start. You're an economist. So what do you make, first of all, what's your immediate reaction to changing this, the research that's being released? What's the impact going to be, and what's your thoughts on it as an expert?
Well, first, it will not happen. I mean, this is kind of a research proposal, but let me explain what's the problem. Look, we've got the central bank is fighting the inflation. I mean, has got their duty to keep the inflation at an acceptable level, let's say below 2% in the European Central Bank case. And the problem is that, and what the paper says is, okay, let's imagine that because of some reason, some expenditures that are not subject to our control, like the oil prices, the international global food prices increase. Oh, those expenditures people must make, must pay more, and the inflation goes up. So what's the natural reaction of the central bank if it is to keep 2% inflation, and if, for example, oil prices and food price increase by 5%, so all the other expenditures must have prices growing much slower than 2%, maybe 1%, maybe 0 or something like that. And the paper says, so in answer to growing prices of some, let's say, raw materials, for example, the central bank is increasing the interest rates because the inflation went up. And at that moment, it's punishing severely, especially the poorer part of the population, because it means a more expensive credit and a very strong increase of interest rates to keep the inflation on average 2%. And what the paper says is, no, the central bank shouldn't look at prices of, or they call it non-discretionary expenditures, like the housing, like the energy, like maybe some part of the food. They should only look and set a target for all the other expenditures that are discretionary. So those ones that we can do and we don't have to do, depending on the situation, our wallets. So let's imagine a situation like that. Oil prices and food price increased by 10%. The inflation went up from 2 to 4%, and the paper says, no, the central bank should look at the other components, and if they still increase at 2%, they shouldn't increase the interest rate, right? So this is an idea that the central bank fighting the inflation too harshly hurts the poorest part of the population. Mm-hmm. And that is true. I mean, this analysis is correct. The point is that the central bank has a task to fight the inflation, not some selected, artificially constructed index that includes only some goods and other not.
But on that, you said that, if I can interrupt you there, so you said that, well, the central bank has a certain role, and that's to target inflation, but ultimately that affects everyone. So why can't we change that? Why can't it also take into account the wider population, as you said earlier, the poor? Why can we not change that?
Yes, because I will tell something that may be a surprise for everybody, but if you think twice, you will agree with me. The central bank is the only institution in the country that is responsible for keeping the inflation on an acceptable level, and that has got tools to do it. No other institution has got this role. And because of that, it has been agreed 20, 30 years ago that the central bank should concentrate on the fighting the inflation. The inflation, full stop. Not the inflation excluding something or not. The inflation. And all the other problems should be solved with the other policy tools. There's always a question, should the central bank take into account not only the inflation, but also the economic growth? And the answer is, to some degree, yes. I mean, in America, they do it. But now the point is, but the central bank should also look at the, social policy of the state and make sure that what it's doing, it's not hurting No, the answer is, sorry, this is not the role of the central bank. We've got the social safety net to deal with the problem of the poverty. And the central bank, if we tell them, rather than fighting the inflation, you should do this, and 5 things, then by the end of the day, it means most likely the central bank will not be capable of fighting the inflation. And let me repeat, this is the only institution in the state that has got the right, the mandate, and the tools to do it. So if we, in a sense, say the central bank should do 5 other things rather than fighting, or together with fighting the inflation, means fighting inflation is no longer the priority. At this moment, will most likely land with much higher inflation simply because no other institution will be capable to do it. On the contrary, fighting the poverty can be done by many institutions, especially by the government spending and the government taxation. So there are the tools to fight the poverty in the hands of the government. There are no tools to fight the inflation in the hands of any other institution but the central bank. And that's why all the economists will tell you it's nice. Well, let me remind you, in Poland, there was all the story that some politicians claimed that central bank in Poland should run the consumer-friendly policy, means lowering interest rate because of the consumers who took the credits. And the answer is, unfortunately, not. I mean, if we say the central bank is doing several policies rather than just fighting the inflation, we will land in a higher inflation because nobody else will be capable of fighting the inflation. At the same time, all these other elements, all the other policies that everybody is are available by the other institutions. There's always, because
if I may, Witold, you said there are these other policies available by other institutions. Yeah, sorry to just interrupt you there. But at the same time, I mean, this research has come forward because you said, well, there are changes now. I mean, there must have been a prompt to have this research being proposed that there is a consideration to change these things. I mean, that does happen in economics. You're the expert here. But why do you think this has come about now? And is there a viability to maybe assume to challenge some of those, as you said, harder economic policies? And the other thing about poverty as well, that's a different thing. I'm talking more about, well, looking at the average household, not necessarily poverty, but why has this come about now at such a moment? There must be a reason for it.
Yes, obviously there is a reason. And I wouldn't say that the central bank will not look at the issue at all. The reason is that we went through the period of a high inflation. We went through a period of various, in some countries there was, even before the war, there was the issue of fighting the inflation. And what was noticed was that really, I mean, kind of brutal use of the monetary policy tools leading to a lot of the harm for the poorer part of the society. So it must be taken into account. But the point is that the right answer is not let's not fight the inflation efficiently. The right point is, if we fight the inflation, we must accompany it by the other policies that are reducing the pain for the rest of the society. This is the right approach. Obviously, what you are talking about is not a European Central Bank policy paper. It's a research paper presented on the European Central Bank Conference. It's a view of some economists. There are some economists claiming that the monetary policy is started to be too technical and without looking at the consequences, social, economic consequences. And obviously the central banks must take it into consideration to some extent, but not to the degree that is postulated in this paper, to forget about the efficient monetary policy and to put, let's say, the fighting poverty as one of at least equal condition for the central bank together with the inflation. This is not the right way, and that's again the statute of the European Central Bank. That's against the macroeconomic knowledge. With understanding that this is, we understand why it's being said.
I want to ask you as well, I mean, you obviously are an expert in all this, but does it have any impact if we look at, well, you're saying about what you're saying in terms of this is the ECB and we have a certain type of effect to the Eurozone. Does this proposal make any more sense for other countries that are not in the Eurozone? If we're looking at emerging markets, is there any sort of more applicability to some of these suggestions elsewhere in other markets?
Well, if we come back to the thinking from the 1970s that the inflation is better to have a higher inflation than the unemployment or the poverty, then obviously anybody can weaken the monetary policy. But there is nothing new in this proposal, except with the exception of a kind of new formula for calculating how to make the monetary policy weaker and less brutal. There is nothing new in this. You've got, if you remember, Krugman and others telling, some Nobel Prize economists telling that we overestimate the role of the inflation. We should make the policy weaker. There is a former Greek finance minister telling that this is the absurd of the bank. The financial sector wants the low inflation and people don't want it. This is not true. We all pay for the inflation. The inflation leads to the slower growth in the longer run. In a short run, yes, an efficient monetary policy brings pain if it is to fight the tendency of inflation of prices to grow. And it is good thing to take it into consideration, maybe thinking parallelly to the main role of the central bank, thinking also about the problems, but definitely not replacing the fight with the inflation, with the inflation plus 5 other policies that central bank should also do.
Right. So, as you said, this is a research paper. It's going to be still hotly, I think, discussed by economists and by academics like yourself, an expert, before we have a conclusion. But I think the jury is out on what you think about it. Look, we'll close it there. Thank you so much, Witold Orłowski. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. It concludes World Talks, but stay tuned right here on TV Pro for more news and commentary. Goodbye.